Hello! Happy spooky season. It is time for our first Halloween themed project of the year. So a while back I was trying to make a skirt and I bought this fabric, which is lovely. I really liked the kind of blue and purple background, and then I realized how big the pattern was when it got here, and I realized that as much as I really love this fabric, I could not make that skirt out of it because it required just a smaller pattern overall. But this is, I don't know if you can tell, it's meant to be, you know, a pattern of bare branches against a night sky, and I really loved it, so I bought 3 yards of it. And then it ended up not working out, so that's just how it goes sometimes. But I also, one sec, while I was shopping for that fabric, I impulse bought this fabric because it's just amazing and I couldn't help myself. So this is panels of ravens silhouetted against full moons. There's like 6 different ones. And so I was thinking that I could make a Halloween themed pillow to live in the living room. So yeah, I'm really excited to use this fabric. Okay, I lied, there's 4, sorry. I thought there were 6 different designs, there's 4. So I got 1 yard, which is, you know, 2 of each of the 4 wonderful raven friends. The one we're going to be using is this friend over in the corner here, the one that's kind of just sitting and looking off into the distance very philosophically. These panels are just a bit over 10 inches. I measured them, so I'm going to be cutting this 10.5 inches so that we get some of the black border here, and then I'm going to be backing it with the other fabric that I showed you. Okay, so now we have the front panel, the back panel, and then I'm gonna make this a little bit more difficult by making this pillow washable, which means that the interior, which is what I'm gonna stuff, is going to be a separate piece, which I'm gonna make out of this fabric, which has been kind of horrifically sun damaged. One of my friends was destashing a while back and he gave me a bunch of fabric, and so this, I've kind of been using it for mock-ups, but it's the perfect thing to do with it is make it the unseen stuffed interior of a pillow, and then this I'll be able to take off and wash whenever I need to. So I have drawn my stitch lines. I am all set to sew this together, and I also realized that after cutting this, this is kind of too narrow. This one was on the edge of the fabric, and I didn't want the widths of the border to be different, so I'm gonna piece this on with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance just to make sure that I can still get that same border width at the bottom. I also went back and took off an 1/8 of an inch all the way around the inner panels just to make sure that the stuffed pillow fits inside the outside of the pillow. I'm gonna do black thread for this one, but for this, since it won't be seen, it's going to be easier on my eyes if I use something contrasting, so I'm going to use the bright yellow thread over there to stitch this together. So I have the interior of the pillow pinned together, right sides together, and I'm using some bright blue, you probably can't see it, but I'm using some bright blue thread to tack it together, just something that will stand out a bit to me on this, although certainly probably yellow or something would have been a better choice, but oh well. decided to take a quick break from sewing the interior of the pillow because there was one task that I felt like I should probably get out of the way while I still had daylight, which is I'm taking this strip of fabric and attaching it to the raven panel so that it'll actually have a wide enough border on the bottom. I am going to trim this selvage off afterwards, but for right now, since it's already such a small strip of fabric, I just figured that trimming it beforehand might make this fray, and I don't want that since I don't have a large margin for error. But basically I'm sewing, you know, black thread on gray fabric with an 1/8 of an inch seam allowance. I know that that's going to be a lot easier while I have the lovely daylight as opposed to this evening when I can get back to stitching this. Good afternoon. So this is the part of the video where I confess that the title was sort of a lie, but here's why. I launched myself into another project. You can't tell because it's dark, but this is a skirt. I have like a waistband bit here, and I'm pleating this lovely dark kind of patterned fabric into it. There's probably a correct name for this pattern that has gone right out of my head at the moment. I'm getting over a cold, so, you know, I got the brain fog going on. Anyways, so this would have been a one-day make if I hadn't gotten the urge to start another project in the middle of it. So this is like, you know, a 2-day make, but it's still gonna be a wonderful, glorious pillow, so let's go ahead and do the next step. Okay, so here is the inside of the pillow. I have stitched it almost all the way around. I've left just a bit to go ahead and flip it inside out with, and then we are going to stuff it with some thread and fabric odds and ends. You're probably thinking right now, this is not enough to stuff a pillow, and you're correct. There's more. There is so much more of this. I probably have enough of these thread and fabric odds and ends to stuff, I don't know, 3 or 4 of these pillows, but we'll just get started with that. Alright, great, so now we've got this flipped right side out. Going to stuff this and then stitch up this little tiny area right here, and then we'll be ready to start on the outer pillow. I suppose this is what I get from trying to stuff my pillow in a very sunny spot. His lordship has stolen my workspace. I have finally run through my fabric odds and ends in that jar, this box here, but I've gotten some odds and ends from my sunflower skirt. There's some extra stuff in here, and I've divided it up into different sized piles. I'm gonna chop that up, and I think that's gonna be quite enough to finish stuffing the pillow, but if not, like I said, there's more. So the pillow is finally stuffed after many containers of thread and fabric scraps, and the only thing we need to do is just close it up. But firstly, last week fall has, let's just say, arrived aggressively at my house, so if you'll give me a second, I'm gonna get cozy. Okay, so basically for this, The first thing to do is to kind of tuck the raw edges inside the pillow and then pin them. Once they're there, we're going to be using a whip stitch, like a very small whip stitch, just to close this up. In order to pin them, you kind of want to fold the raw edges over and then pinch them together slightly. This will make the stuffing kind of scooch down, but that's okay. Once this is closed up, you will be able to scoot the stuffing around as much as you'd like. I have found that stuffing a pillow, a cushion, a plushie, whatever it is, with fabric and thread scraps does kind of lead to, I guess you could say it's a more dense stuffing than polyfill, for example, but I don't really feel like it matters that much. You'll just have to like fluff the pillow up a little bit more than you maybe normally would. But for me, it's worth it just to be saving all of my fabric and thread odds and ends that would overall otherwise just end up in the trash. So this is just, you know, it's just more environmentally friendly. I'm not buying polyfill, which is plastic, and I'm using up something that is literally a waste waste product. And it also means that I don't have to spend more money on the project, so that's always nice. Okay, I'm just gonna real quick take a little bit of contrasting thread and tack this so that I don't worry about stabbing. I just did it. I literally just did it so that I don't have to worry about stabbing myself with a pin while I am stitching. At this step, the pillow always ends up looking a little pinched along here, but that's because, you know, the tacking is further down than the actual stitching is going to be. I'm just going to use a little scrap of gray thread that I had lying around, and for this, you definitely want to start the thread inside the pillow instead of from the outside, because otherwise you're risking the knot being able to come undone just from abrasion. To start this section of the seam, I'm going to take my needle and thread and I'm going to tuck it down inside the pillow, and I'm also trying to get it underneath the seam allowance. So I'm going to start by kind of pulling this apart, pulling the seam allowance up, and then put the needle underneath the seam allowance, and then I'm trying to like run it over a little bit into where kind of, I guess, the normal part of the seam, for lack of a better word, was, so that it's starting a little bit past that point and there won't be any gaps, because I don't want all of these fabric scraps to come out. There we go, just like that. Okay. So once I'm there, it occurs to me that I'm probably going to be using a ladder stitch, not a whip stitch for this, my bad. But basically it's, you come over to where the other seam allowance is and just take a little tiny bit of the fabric there, pull the needle through, and then over to the other side again. And it ends up looking like a ladder, which is why it's called ladder stitch. So that may give you a little bit of a better look. I recognize that this fabric kind of makes this hard to see, especially with the gray thread. But here we are, this is ladder stitch. I think kind of one of my favorite things about stuffing something, you know, pillow, plushie, whatever, with fabric scraps is it's kind of a trip down memory lane. I mean, this Halloween pillow that I'm making, it has scraps from some of the first Halloween costumes that I ever made myself. It has scraps from my first reenactment gear, the quilting projects that I made in college, just all of that, like, I don't know, some of my early sewing memories are now in this pillow, and I just think that's kind of cool. So here is our inner pillow. this edge is the one that I just stitched up, and the only other thing we have left to do is take the outer pillow, one sec, which I totally did not drop on the floor at all right there, is take our outer pillow and add the zipper, so back, front, and I went a little bit of extra, and I felled the edges on the inside just because I figured, you know, if this is meant to be removable, I don't want the seam allowances on this fraying. The zipper is just a touch long for this. We're gonna have to do a little bit of zhuzhing. Now, it is entirely probable that there is a better way to do this than the one that I'm doing. But basically, I am pinning the zipper onto the seam allowance here, and then I'm gonna tack it and stitch it down on this side, and then once it's stitched on this side, I'll flip it over and do the other side. We'll probably have to flip the whole thing back to inside out in order to stitch that, but you know, this is always the way that I've added zippers to pillows. If it's not the right way, whoops. Okay, so this is all tacked with some lovely bright blue thread, and now I'm going to go ahead and just stitch it through, back stitches as always, and then do the other side of this. All right, now for the most awkward part of the whole project. Once the zipper is on, I have to unzip the zipper in order to flip this right side out, which is always a kind of a zero fun task. So you kind of have to grab it through the fabric on one side and then start pulling the zipper down. But then once you get that, you can kind of reach into the pillow, unzip it the rest of the way. Alright, that was actually more painless than I thought, so ta-da, here it is with the zipper on the side. Yes, it's a little bit long on the bottom, but shh. I declare this to be a success. Let's go see how the cat likes it. Angus, hello. I have a present for you. There you go, yes. Do you like the pillow, Angus? Yeah, what you think? What you think, baby boy? Well, it looks like his lordship approves of his new pillow, so happy birthday, Angus. His birthday's on Halloween. So yeah, stay tuned for my next video, which will be a Halloween costume. It does involve a waistcoat, and hopefully Angus will join us for that project as well.